Hey, I'm Coach T. This is the actual for real week 12 of my C Sharp year long video diary in documenting my progress towards learning C Sharp, learning to code in 2024 and 2025. And really, these videos are for me primarily so I can come back in July of 2025, but I'm hoping that maybe somebody else finds them interesting too, because I do try to be honest in documenting my progress in learning the different components of C Sharp, learning to utilize it, learning to build new stuff. And it's definitely an interesting journey. Not every week is made equal though. So there are some weeks where I have a ton of time and I end up doing a lot of coding, like an hour or two a day, which obviously that's not even part-time work, but I do have a full-time job and I have kids and I'm married, so 2 hours out of that time is kind of substantial. It usually means an hour before work and an hour after work, or an hour after the kids go down, sometimes 2 hours after the kids go down. And then there's weeks like this week where I had a surfeit of time because I was able to more effectively leverage my breaks at work. So I was able to use my lunches to read. And I did a lot of reading and a lot of Udemy video watching this week. It's kind of an interesting mix of a week because when I was on at work, I was busy, I was packed, but I did get that sacrosanct lunch. I was left alone during my lunch, so that meant that I was able to kind of cruise through some Udemy stuff, and then wherever I felt like those topics weren't sufficient, I was able to also read after work because I had some downtime. That we had a couple of evenings where my wife took the kids to go do something and I wasn't in on it. So I was able to just use like those 2-3 hours for research. So I got a lot of time this week and I didn't write a lot of code this week, which is interesting, but I was making connections in the background. So the big takeaway for this week is that I can now read and write into and out of a file. So I started to look at file types and saving to files and loading from files because part of the benefit of actually having a lunch for once was that I was able to start to make steady progress through Krystyna's Unit 3 in Udemy. You probably hear my cat weeping in the background. I don't know what's going on. But I had thought this was going to take me like through October to finish her third module, which I'll pull up here. So this is one of her coding exercises, but actually, no, I guess I'm in the fourth section: object-oriented programming, polymorphism, inheritance, and interfaces. Which, by the way, since it just came up, much more comfortable with what interfaces are for over this past week. All the extra reading and research really, really, really helped build out what the purpose of that is for. So the one big chunk of C Sharp that I wrote this week, I ended up having well, maybe three, but really two concrete uses for interfaces, which I'll talk about in a minute. I can't show it because I wrote it in Notepad on my break. So, like over the course of Monday and Tuesday, where I had a little bit of downtime, and then after work for a few minutes, I sat there and I actually wrote out an encapsulated version of my school data processing program. And as I was doing it, because now that I understand what records, kind of understand what structs are, but really in particular records and how lists work, I was like, oh, if I'm going to have an iterator processing over these assessments, they have to, at the minimum, have a couple of common features, which is an interface. And by implementing an interface rather than just straight polymorphism, I was able to write up some static methods that will iterate through any type of assessment that has the IA assessment interface. So I know last week I whined a little bit about not getting them. Context is like, it's huge. So once I had that, I was like, oh, okay, I've got a Dibbles orphan, I've got a Dibbles maze, for example. Both of them, you have the total number of correct and the total number of incorrect. That became the basis for my assessment interface because also we have other assessments like the QPS in the past, and those both also have total correct and total incorrect. So now I can plug any of those in and I can use a static method to give like an accuracy percentage rating or a growth between two assessments based on that accuracy rating. So the interface allowed me to have customized versions of the assessments where sometimes there's additional properties or data, like on the maze, there is a different form of calculating the accuracy. It's a different formula than just straight up, the number of correct minus the number of errors divided by the total number of options filled in. So those have the different customized properties, but they still work for the process for the purposes of the interface and in reporting growth between assessments. So I get it. And then on the student level as well, we have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. We have students that receive services and don't receive services. So those became their own polymorphed classes that share student interface. And then I can plug them into any sort of reading class that's built by the program. And now, because I started to write to and from JSONs, I can save the entire class with all of the student rosters and each of the student instances holding their own assessments. I can save the entire thing out to a JSON and read and write it, which is making it much easier to work with. Part of this is still in process though, so I can't show it because it's all in notepad text. And the theory works. The application is not fully there yet. So maybe next week I'll be able to show off that reading and writing program where you can overwrite, save a class. I did a lot of reading about file types. So anyway, so in the object-oriented section 4 here, I was able to crush like probably 10 videos at an appropriate learning pace, taking notes, and then in Notepad, I was able to write out examples. I breezed through her coding exercises with one exception where I just did not understand the question being asked. Once I got the question, I was able to solve it right away. So that was a lot of wind in my sails. So I'm down to here. It's funny that's not checked. Probably because I watched the video on my iPad. At work, I don't have internet access, so I have to prepare things. But, that's fine. So anyway, so when I came home, I had watched the videos on my lunch, so I can get 2, maybe 3 videos out of my lunch. I take my notes, I cram my food in like 5 minutes so I can use the rest of my time for learning. Then I come home and I was cruising through these coding exercises, cruising through the quizzes were very easy in this case because I get it. I've read so much about interfaces and polymorphism now that like I was excited to get home and tackle some of these, take 15-20 minutes after work, and then I can go back upstairs and play with the girls or work out or whatever. So you can see I'm getting really close here. She's got this huge assignment thing where you're writing a cookies cookbook and you're saving recipes in and out of the program so you can load in your recipes. So that was why I started to look at JSON, but also I wrote Corgsharp and I was kind of bummed that like every time you boot the application you start over from scratch. So I had started to feel the need for this. So made a lot of progress on her Udemy course. I'm feeling like I'm staying abreast of what she's teaching. I wish I had more time when I got home, in the evenings, and that my brain wasn't so burned, but it is what it is. And I'm at about 25% complete in this software now, or not the software, this course. So in the last time I tried to learn C#, way back in July 2023, I made it 5% of the way in before I burned out. This time I'm at 25% and I'm really eager to learn more because there's cool stuff coming up. So we've got exceptions and error handling. Right now I have to very carefully engineer around my own potential screw-ups. I don't really understand how to handle errors, although I know it from Python. I just don't know the implementation in C#, and obviously what I understood in Python was the tip of the iceberg for error handling. But try-catch blocks, I got pretty used to using those. And then we've got generics and advanced types. I have no concept of what a generic is. I don't think. I mean, it lists lists in here, and I'm used to working with lists because that's how Corgsharp's inventory works. It's how football worked. It's how my student class applications all work. So if a generic is just a list, then I got generics down. But I don't know. Link is like SQL, I guess. I'm kind of curious about that, although connecting between databases, it's a little bit above and beyond me. And then .NET Under the Hood, I actually started listening to these. It's really interesting what's going on under the hood, how this thing works. So I know I jumped ahead, but like this was before work in the mornings when I'm putting around drinking coffee, doing dishes or whatever to try and alleviate the toddler mess from my wife. I will listen to these because I don't really need to look at the screen to hear the theory. So I've been listening to like maybe 2 of these in the mornings this week. So it's kind of weird because like I was on it before work. I'd have like a half hour to work, and then I'd have my solid lunch chunk of a half hour to do theory, take notes, and then like an hour in the evenings. And the other thing that I did this week that was C# E, but not really, it doesn't really feel like C#, is I started working through Unity Learn. So this is, it's neat. It's hard, but I'm enjoying having a more fun visual way to apply what it is that I'm learning with C#. So if we back way up to July 2023 again, this is a month that will go down in infamy. Actually, it might have been August. I bought 2 courses on Udemy. They're the first 2 courses that I bought, and I've got a bunch now because I really do like this platform. They don't sponsor me. I am never trying to sell anything to anybody, but I've picked up courses when there are sales, and you can see I haven't started most of these, but they're things that I absolutely intend to work through. But my very first 2 Udemy courses were this one, Learn to Create a Vampire Survivor Style Game in Unity by James Doyle. And I bounced really hard off the C#. In particular, I kind of had my head around like the implementation interface of Unity. Like he did a pretty good job of like walking you through that, but I was not at all prepared to understand the C#. So, and it was just for fun. It wasn't anything serious. I like Vampire Survivors, and I was like, this would be kind of fun to make my own version of this, knowing nothing at all about what I was getting myself into. And then I bought Krystyna's class as well. They're both on sale at the time for like $15. So, and most of these, I haven't paid full price for any of these. I've paid $15 or less for all of this over the course of 2 years. So, and these ones are, a bunch of these are actually free too. So I picked up hers, and I was like, all right, if I'm going to understand James, I got to understand C#. So I need to understand Krystyna. Well, I couldn't understand Krystyna, and as you can see, I eventually caved, and I never finished James's survival course because it was just too hard. I didn't understand what was going on with the C#. You know, we had public static voids, and we had void mains and void starts and void updates, and then we had a bunch of crazy stuff going on with like animating and flipping and rotations and transform.translates and transform.rotates, and it was way above my head. This time, going back into Unity, I have almost a year's worth of experience now playing with Blender, so I'm much more familiar with things like vertices, meshes, textures, materials, navigating 3D space, even though the 2 interfaces are like night and day. I significantly prefer Blender, believe it or not, but they do different things, so that's okay. But I have all that experience with modeling in 3D for fun, just making models for myself, for my own 3D printer, for the games that I help write, or for my friends, or in a couple of cases I've modeled widgets for my wife for like cookie molds or specific little tools. So I have all that experience, and then also I've spent the last 4 months, I think, what is it, July, August, September, October, okay, so maybe, yeah, like 3.5, almost 4 months, really cracking down, trying to understand C# on the back of previous 6 months learning Python and SQL. So when I booted up the Learn.Unity junior programmer pathway here, I was like, oh, I know exactly what the script does. There was no hesitation. I was like, oh, it's a void main and then void start. Okay, that initializes everything. Oh, it's a void update. Well, I've done update loops before. I used them when I made football and I made the other games. So I was like, oh, got it. You know, now instead of freaking out about the interface and feeling terrible because I don't understand how things are connecting, I'm like, oh, I'm declaring a rigid body. Okay, I'm going to go over to the documentation on Unity. What's a rigid body? Oh, a rigid body allows a thing to interact with a physics engine. Okay, and then in the void start, I'm going to go get that to initialize it. Okay, got it. That makes sense. Public, private, void, whatever. All of that at this point is like, it's just nonchalant for me. So that was a big feather in my cap too. I don't know how deep I'm going to go with the Unity stuff. I've goofed around. I made a little, I can't boot it up because it'll take forever, but I made a little game where you run along a platform as a pill, and there's some platforms that move up and down. You know, they'll knock you off if you're not careful. Very simple, but basically I wanted to have a fun execution of all of the theory that I've been practicing, because I work really hard on understanding what's going on in the logic in this code. It's one of the things that I've put the most cognitive effort into since my master's degree in literacy, and really trying to understand the cognitive psychology and the developmental science behind how the brain learns to read and how we acquire and then expand literacy. I poured hundreds of hours of training into that after my degree, post grad, to become a facilitator and a trainer in some like big PD programs. And that's a continuing effort. I never stopped. I still have to, in order to maintain my license, I have to do a lot of additional research. So after that, I mean, outside of family, outside of like, working out and trying to maintain my health, probably coding has become the next thing where I've put the most effort into learning. So it was high time to do something fun with it that wasn't just a console game. I don't know how deep I'm going to get into that. It's certainly fun, but I can see that becoming a singular focus where I would have to pause to learn Unity, and because it's its own thing, it's its own extension, the language is its own software suite, and I don't know if that's what I actually want to do. I've soured a little bit on Blazor, because last weekend on Sunday I spent about 6 hours watching tutorials, reading about it, reading through the Microsoft tutorials, and I was making almost no headway. And I started to realize, like, there's some web dev stuff here that I don't have. I just don't have that knowledge yet. So I think I had started to think, well, maybe I'll go to Windows Presentation Foundation. But then I read more about that, and it's not really used. The desktop apps don't really have much of a place anymore. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I felt kind of listless. And I was like, well, I got WinForms, I got Unity, I got Maui, but Maui has its own issues. WinForms is getting old. I need something to practice on. And so I kind of had winnowed it out to Unity, just as I want to do something fun. I want to build something. What am I going to do? So it ended up being Unity, which surprised me, because I really thought I was going to be waiting a long time to play with it. But I do have to evaluate on, whenever I have my time in the evenings and the mornings, do I want to spend that time researching? Because I still do need to learn about structs, generics, IEnumerables. There's a whole bunch of stuff on my developer roadmap that I want to work through. Or do I want to fart around on Learn Unity and learn the interface there and learn about scripting and how things interact? So that, to some extent, feels like a poisoner's choice, where it's like fun or research that enables more fun, or research that enables, so it's this chicken egg situation, kind of. So I mean, I like video games, but I don't play them very often. I maybe play a video game once every 2-3 weeks. Coding has taken over that for me. I'll probably make a video about that at some point. But for me, I have significantly more fun writing code at this point than I do sitting down to play a video game. This is on normally it charges up here, but Unity allows me to play my prototype screw around game with my controller, which was definitely a neat little experience. But I just don't play video games anymore. I've got kids. I'd rather read books with the kids, or go outside, and then I get my hour in the night, and it's like, do I want to do something consuming or constructive? I'm at the phase in my life where I want to do stuff that's constructive. So even if it is building something for consumption. But my primary focus, at least in the research and the theory, is still 100% those school apps. I just don't know how I'm going to build the GUI. And that is a point that I hit. Wow, this is getting really long. I'm sorry. I didn't think it was going to go for 20 minutes. I hit this point in Python as well where I was like, do I want to do Pygame or tkinter? Because I had learned enough Python to be able to do object-oriented programming pretty conversantly. I felt like I understood it pretty well. I didn't. I did not understand it that well. Now, with C Sharp, I can go back and do the Python object-oriented stuff much more easily. But at the time, I was like, all right, we got to move on to a library because that's where the Learn Python subreddit was like, do projects, learn libraries. But after 4 months of C Sharp and really, really plugging away, I mean, that was through the summer, it was 2-3 hours a day of study practice with reading from the manuals, basically replacing all of my hobby reading. So maybe like 4 or 5 hours of either research or practice a day through July and August and the beginning of September. I definitely feel like now is the time to start to work on a project and learn a library so I can build something tangible and concrete, because nobody wants to use the console to do the types of work that I am doing. It's just not the end user. And my end user is ultimately teachers. I want teachers to be able to use this software to analyze their data, make informed decisions about how they can group and refine instruction for kids, about whether kids need to be receiving a certain intervention or maybe not. So I have some thinking to do. I don't have a mentor, so that means I'm operating on my own. And there's conflicting information. Unity is in absolutely no case the solution for my school software question. But it's definitely, is it Maui, Blazor, WinForms, or WPF? It is one of those. I just don't know which one. Two of them are desktop only, and they're Windows only, which is not necessarily what I want. But to get into Maui, to get into Blazor, my understanding is I need to bone up on web dev skills and back-end web dev skill stuff. And that is its own tangent. So kind of like with the Unity problem, then it would be, if I did dedicate my time to it, it would become, do I want to go down the path of learning web dev and stall on C Sharp, or continue, so it's this weird bifurcation point. It's this weird fork in the road. And it's just where I'm at. A year ago, I couldn't have ever imagined that I'd be having this conversation with myself, this interior monologue. But I also didn't know what a JSON was, and I didn't know how to write to a JSON, and now I do. So, I don't know. Weird week. Not a lot of actual code. Only probably a couple hundred lines total. There are weeks where I write a couple thousand. But a lot of thinking about how do I want to proceed, because as the winter comes and it gets dark out earlier, hopefully the girls go down a little bit earlier. Hopefully I have a little bit more time in the evenings to work. But I want that work to be productive. I like the idea of be caffeinated and ready to work on what it is that you want to build. Don't fart around and waste time. Stoic dead time, So where I have time, whether it's recapturing the 35 minutes that I get on my lunch, or whether it's capturing the 45 minutes before work or an hour after the girls go down, I want that to be constructive, building something useful to somebody, and also cognitively, personally challenging for me. So I just don't know. I don't know which way to go, but that's a good problem to have, because I'm not freaking out about how to actually do the coding. I'm perseverating on what means to apply the coding. That's a good problem to have. So this is the last log for September of 2024. Week 12, after 3 months of coding and recording video logs here, plus the couple weeks from before I decided to do the video log, we can do so much that now the trick is, how do we want to apply it? And that's a nice little takeaway. My God, it's almost a half hour long. I doubt anybody's watching this, but if you are, I appreciate it. This is really for me. So, yeah, I think that's it. This weekend, I'm going to work on Probably figuring out, or at least refining, how to write a whole class instance to a JSON and importing it, and then I might build another console game. Maybe that might be fun. So I can save a state. That might be cool. I might want to do that. Yeah, and then I'll probably continue to push along the Unity track until I figure out if I want to do WinForms, WPF, Maui, or Blazor. So if you are watching this and you're a C# developer, or you're a game dev, or you're a desktop software engineer, leave me a comment and a recommendation, because I would love some professional advice. I don't want to get into game dev for money by any stretch of the imagination. That's not where my real passion is. It's just kind of fun, but at least on the surface level, I imagine it's probably a nightmare at the lower levels, like everything else is. But yeah, if you work with Blazor or Maui or WPF or WinForms, I would love to hear about your experience, and whether you think that your C# application, or C# library would be a good fit for what I'm trying to do with teachers, as I outlined it a couple minutes ago. That's it. Geez, I gotta stop talking. We're gonna go pick apples, and I'm gonna go touch grass for a little bit. So I will see you next week. Keep coding, keep challenging yourself, do something difficult every day, and I will see you in week 13 and in spooky October.